lots of
It's
technical
going to be
babble.
recorded forever.
So I found that the intro being video, a lot of people can take a 5-minute video and digest it a lot quicker than they would a long email. So, John, when you're ready, we'll do it.
Yeah, it's going.
All right. Well, first off, I want to thank Charlie and Salesforce for hosting this meeting today.
Thanks everybody for coming to Salesforce. Welcome to Salesforce.
Yeah, world headquarters. So everybody knows what we're doing here today. Nobody needs an introduction to the orange button and whatnot. But what I did want to do was just simply kind of walk through what we're trying to do again, just to make sure we have a context for today's meeting. As you all know, I use the word herding cats. It really is herding cats. Everybody here really should have their own reason for being here. This is not a Wells Fargo project, but Wells Fargo will certainly benefit. Just as much as any Salesforce developer will benefit, just as much as BG&E could develop it. Everybody in this room should have a stake in the game where they're here for their own company and their own interests. And so that's what we're looking for, is that herd of cats in which for their own self-interest can propel the ball forward for data standards. When you look at the orange button's objective is actually very simple: to increase the amount of solar installations. How we do that, by making solar more bankable and whatnot, is the task of the orange button. And on the human side, when we create more solar opportunities and more jobs, when we create more opportunities, we create more jobs, and that really impacts the people. So Wells Fargo has donated $50,000, $25,000 to Sunspec to work with the XBRL and the financial standards, but also to Chico, to try to see if we can't do something on Salesforce with the old Chico Common App that Dan had built into something that can be used to be a catalyst. So the whole orange button has a number of objectives, and there's a number of players that are involved in it. I, on the other hand, am only concentrating on 2 trees within that forest: the company profile data set and the solar system performance data set. And those 2 together have the highest level of impact for the amount of people it touches, but also the amount of things we can do with those 2 data sets. My objective as part of the orange button is to advocate for data interoperability, not for a data system, or not for proprietary, or not to endorse a system, but to enable B2B, so that the data sets can go from anywhere to anywhere without constraint. The objective, obviously, is historically solar systems were pretty hard to understand what was happening. The evolution of technology and the creation of digital information is creating a situation where tomorrow these solar panels and arrays will actually start to tell us a lot more information about how they're performing. That in turn can create an opportunity for insurance products. It can do for surety products. It allows for a collaboration of understanding of definitions and obligations, so that it really does create a financial advantage. So the question is, what's going to change? This information is going to change the landscape of financial products. At the end of the day, though, when you look at all of the panels out there, that literally creates one of the things we now call the Internet of Things. Each system is literally its own entity. It has its own IP address, and that IP address could be for inverters, for pieces. There's thousands of components. There can be thousands of systems out there. The estimated construction is going to be $900 billion. There's going to be so many innovative ideas that rely on the Internet of Things that we have to rely on data standards to get it there. So again, with Charlie, with your background with the Internet of Things at Salesforce, it's going to be critical to all of the various stakeholders to understand that the Internet of Things only works if there's data standards so that data can be exchanged. The model that we're talking about is that each entity stands on its own, and that if we are successful in creating a Salesforce app as a prototype that we can share, that it can be available on the Salesforce App Exchange, and our business partners can download it for free, therefore reducing the barrier of entry by reducing the cost. But also there's a 100% guarantee of compatibility. So it's kind of like the Trojan horse. If everybody comes and downloads from the Salesforce App Exchange our common app or the data analytics for 61724, then they know they're going to be able to exchange the information. And then people that have the app will make their own modifications and do their own proprietary enhancements. So the idea is not to create the product, but rather to create a catalyst for innovation so that other peoples can create other applications from this foundation. But at the end of the day, as you look at the life cycle, the information will go around from Salesforce to Salesforce app. But at the end of the day, it is still whoever to whatever. And at the end of the day, the data resides in the owner, whether it be Travelers, a CNA, a Wells Fargo, a Citibank. Just because we've exchanged information on the Salesforce app does not mean the Salesforce app still holds it. Whatever it lands, it lands. So when we look at the big interconnection projects, the process between the original design all the way through construction is always using the IE 61724. It has what are the components, what it's made up of, and what are those components supposed to do. So it starts in the construction phase, in the design phase, it gets to the operational phase, and then ongoing maintenance. That data set can be used all the way through. In the construction phase, we'd be working with the XBRL, and one of our partners is Sage, that has 40% of the construction market. They're willing to work with us and have that data interoperability so that all of their customers would be able to send their information that was engaged in the energy space. But this is a $100 million project. The little deals, and where I appreciate PG&E coming, is the on-bill for getting distributed energy, which is really the focus of the orange button, is to create data interoperability for smaller systems. But a smaller system still needs to know what its components are, it still has to be constructed, and it still has to be maintained. So the functionality of the data set doesn't change between a $100 million project or a $100,000 project or a $10,000 project. The challenge is in data operability is not can we get the standard, it's can we get the standard adopted. So the on-bill is something that the federal government has set up. It's starting to roll out in a number of states, so it's very immature, which means we still have an opportunity to try to influence it. Now the on-bill, and I'll go into this later, really is talking about distributed energy, which is the focus of the orange button. But the other thing it does is it allows us to have some flexibility in partnering with utilities to achieve some of the objectives of the utilities, particularly in California where SB 350 requires 50% renewables by 2030. We can help craft the laws that use the data analytics to make solar more bankable. And so we're trying to work with that project. But at the end of the day, the orange button has three pieces, the SGIP, the SunSpec Alliance, and then ultimately NREL for the long-term hold. And we're all here in this room. And so what I'd like to do is I'll give you a brief overview of who's in the room and then ask everybody else to kind of follow up. But as you know, I'm a cat herder, and one of the biggest cats to herd, frankly, is Wells Fargo, because they have any number of IT projects, they have any number of things that they are asked to participate in, and to vet and qualify on something that we cannot really identify how many solar people, how many companies, is going to be very difficult. But what is neat about Wells Fargo is it has an organization within it called the Innovation Group. And it literally challenges its people to look at innovation and to try to come up with ideas that the bank can run with. So it has an out-of-the-box opportunity, which is, I just love it. So the head of our innovation group has been listening to my fire hose now for a while, but this is Mike, and he's been following what we've been doing and trying to see if Wells Fargo can contribute within that. John Teeter is a friend of mine that I got to know through the DOE and the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel when he was back at the White House developing the green button. He now has a contract with the federal government on a joint venture to help develop data standards. And he is also a recipient of the Wells Fargo Innovation Award. So we're really excited about his partnership. John is from PG&E has agreed to come even though he's a little nervous because none of us really know where this is going to go, and any one of us that comes represents big companies is always afraid of getting ahead of his skis. So John, I appreciate you coming with us and trying to see what it is we can do. And Bryce, particularly yourself, you totally coming in blind, so welcome, welcome. I hope that at the end of this meeting you get excited about the opportunity that we can partner with PG&E. Charlie, as the CTO of Salesforce, has an amazing job in trying to find out what's out there that can be of value to the Salesforce community. He met me at Dan's meetup, and he's been very receptive to see if we can't do something together with the energy industry. Dan is the poor guy who came to me, what is it now, 15 years ago, while still just coming out of Chico. And he was my toy maker, and everything that I developed in the Chico Common App, Dan built, and then he's gone on not only to do a great career, but he's one of the top Salesforce people with a company called Kennedy. He leads this Bay Area Developers Work Group here in the Bay Area. And so if anybody has any questions about what happened with the Chico Common App, how to do it, and how to replicate it, he's your guy, and he's offered to contribute as much as he can, except he's got a bandwidth that is not very wide. So I really appreciate you taking some time today to join us, Dan.
Thank
Tom has the impossible task at Sunspec Alliance of getting 60% of the energy business to all use the data standard within 24 months.
No problem.
No problem. But the Sunspec Alliance has done a great job through the years as a trade alliance, bringing together standards. It's mostly been in the industrial and in the inverter and mechanical side. It hasn't been in the finance side, but they've been working on it. I've been hitting them up to try to participate with them. And Tom, I really appreciate you coming because I know you've got the toughest task probably of them all. John, obviously, is my partner at the bank. He does environmental finance. Everybody likes him better because he's got money. I just sell insurance. So he gets invited to all the parties and I hang out with him. Then Joe has been very active at SGIP, also with the history of the Sunspec Alliance. And Joe and I have been working on trying to find a way to make it monetized for businesses. Joe has his own business in Arizona. And if we're successful, companies like his will be the ones that will be the front leaders in creating the innovative and the opportunities. So it's really, we're trying to make it something he could use. And then John is a partner of mine that was originally with Silverado Power. We put together the original surety bonds with John. And when I advocated open standards and all the rest, John actually provided funding to me at Wells Fargo so that I could pursue membership at XBRL, not membership, but all the travel and all the expenses that we did. John actually paid for it and contributed as part of Silverado Power. And then he sold Silverado Power to what is still one of our largest solar developers. But John is now working in the international space and doing consulting all over the place. So his insights are going to be very positive and contributing today. Tom is another example. Tom does insurance for solar projects, and the data would be available to him to create innovative insurance products. And again, if we want to make solar more bankable, we need financial products. So he's part of that team that is looking for self-serving, try to come up with innovative ideas on what to do with the data. So our job at the Orange Button is to give him the resources to create something. Matthias is with TUV, which does a lot of the system monitoring now and the data standards. He heads up the 404 working group for the IEC, and he's been instrumental in putting together the spreadsheet and work on the data definitions so we can all have something to work with. And then last but not least is my partner at XBRL. Michelle has been working with us under a contract with Sunspec Alliance to make the data sets fit and conform to XBRL so that the financial markets have comfort that they are actually something that they can buy in and take on. So with that, that's my introduction. Everybody kind of knows a little bit about why I've asked you all here, but this is not a presentation. And the real challenge here is how do we leave this room with something that was substantial and substantive? And to me, the answer is two. There's two data sets. I'd like to have the company profile and a Salesforce app. What does it take to get there? We have a group of students that are ready for the next semester. We paid $25,000 to queue them up. What can we do with that resource so that the people in this room don't have to spend a lot of time doing spreadsheet stuff, but actually can be doing the more high-end stuff? And then lastly, we paid $25,000 to coordinate the data standards with XBRL and 5.0, which is part of the Basel group, Basel 239 compliance effort that the bank is involved in. How do we get that data set into a Salesforce app that could do data analytics that could go up on the Salesforce app and be distributed? And so that's our task. So welcome to the party. I hope you had a bite to eat, but I'll go on to say good luck. Because I think if we can do those two things today, the people in this room certainly have the wherewithal to get it done. So there we are. Now, if you want to do a little bit of self-introduction, or do we want to jump into a working session? Mike, you took over the last meeting.
Oops.
So you're welcome to take over. Or
I didn't take over, not a chance.